Hello there. I'm going to talk about the process of how alchemical medicines and elixirs were made. And here I've put some backgrounds and a character from some old visual novel stock to give you the feeling of human interaction. Okay, so essentially, the old idea was that if you could get something into an edible or liquid form, then it would become an elixir, which was an alchemical medicine. Now, you might wonder, what can you get into an edible or liquid form? And this depends on the experience of the alchemist. You can get just about anything into an edible or liquid form if you know how to do it. And that is part of the process of elixir and spagyric and tincturing based alchemy. One way I like to think about it is that you're trying to extract the oil or the juices of something. Because if you condense the juices of something down, usually it will form some kind of oil, or it might crystallize, or it comes into some kind of gummy resin. Usually. Plant ingredients are fairly easy, as if you, say, squeeze a fruit, it will give its liquid. You can then break the fruit down to its pieces, like its skin, for example, and it will. You can try to get the skin of an apple, the juice from the skin of an apple, and that's going to have different chemical properties or different just tastes, different properties in general than, say, the flesh of the apple. Similarly, the seeds will have a different type, and even if you go to the apple tree, the leaves of an apple tree will also be different in the stem and the roots, etc. So you use different parts for different kinds of elixirs. Usually the roots are more for the lower body, you can think. The stem is more for the middle body, and the fruits and flowers is more for the head, you can think. You can always add all of these or a mixture of some of them. Preferably, I usually use the roots of things or the leaves. I find it's the easiest to use. Though usually if you're making, say, a perfume, or something more subtle and floral, you can use flowers. This then leads into, just say if you have something dried, a dried root or a dried leaf or stem does not have any juice. Not until you cook it in water, you add liquids, and then eventually you'll see the liquid will change color, it will gain the properties of its. Now, alchemists then figured out that you could use different chemicals or different liquids and reagents and even powders like alkali to extract things more. I like to just use water if I can, or water and alcohol, because I find it gives a much cleaner result. But for example, the alchemist would then figure out that using plant ashes would be good to extract plant oils. Plant ashes are, for example, potassium and nitrogen carbonates and hydroxides if you extract it and refine it further and further. Most things can be extracted and refined very, very far. And for example, if you burn a plant down into its ash, this is a further refinement of the plant. You lose the oils, which are a higher medicinal component, but the ashes are the lower, more physical medicinal component. Then if you put water, you mix water into these ashes, and you take the water, you gain a live water, an alkaline water. This is a further refined component of these ashes, which would become a potassium and sodium and some other mineral hydroxide. You could then even refine this further through various means, etc., etc. This is more how we have chemistry. Chemistry relies on very refined organic and non-organic components. Non-organic are more thought of as usually alkali powders and mineral acids and minerals, metals, crystals, earth substances, etc. And organic is more that which you've gained from herbs and plants and more the oily form of something. For example, you can actually make an organic mineral component by combining plant or animal reagents and minerals, which is actually how we start to turn minerals into a palatable form, because any kind of mineral form like a raw iron or iron ore or metal iron, metal copper, these are actually poisonous to eat. Now, of course, some people with very strong digestion can eat them, and you can actually eat them, but they will make your stomach hurt, and that is a toxic, the most notable toxic component. They will still actually have a medicinal component as rare minerals, like, or, I mean, not rare, but general earth substances like clay. Red clay, for example, will heat the body up. Regular clay, it can purge the body. It is semi-toxic because it's not unrefined, but of course it can be used. Similarly, iron ores were sometimes used, magnetite even, a red iron ore. Now these cause a lot of inflammation, which is a toxic form, but again, as I said, they have been used. Now, if you were to refine a mineral form into its more palatable form, you want to make it an organic. Now, vinegar and alcohol are the main two plant reagents. If you were to mix a iron oxide, which is an iron that has been burnt in open air, iron powder, which has been burnt in open air, iron ore powder as well, it'll oxidize. Similarly, if you were making an ash, it's just a metal ash. Then if you were to mix vinegar onto this and let it sit for a while and maybe heat it for a while or leave it outside, it would eventually leach its components. Similarly, if you were to use a hydrochloric acid, which is a salt acid, hydrochloric, I believe they get from dry distilling various chloride salts. Similarly, if you were to dry distill some nitrogen salts, get nitric acid. There are other ways to make it, of course, though. And sulfuric acids are also made by at least one method. The older method is dry distilling sulfur-based compounds like green iron sulfate. And eventually you want to mix in a vinegar. Now, of course, I'm simplifying the process, so do your research or wait for a video tutorial. But essentially, an acetate would be added. So this would form an iron acetate, which, if I remember correctly, was a yellowish or a greenish kind of compound. They look very beautiful. Like a copper acetate is a very dark blue. It's quite nice. And then the copper carbonate is more of a light blue, which is very beautiful as well. Now these would be cooked down until it's crystal form, and they would be washed with water until the vinegar smell would be removed. And then eventually, as you see, you have created an organic form of a mineral, which is quite interesting. Now it's still fairly poisonous. If you eat it, you'll know exactly why. Because it tastes terrible. That makes you feel a little bit sick. Though there is, of course, everything everything has mineral and medicinal and toxic effects. It's just how much of one, and also it's how much of it you use, and there's a bunch of other variations of that. Alcohol would then be added until this acetate becomes sweet, So you would sweet it with alcohol, a high percentage. Not high enough that you couldn't mix it in, but high enough that it would be very sweet. And eventually this would create a palatable enough form of the iron. Actually, if I remember correctly, it becomes red. I believe it's red maybe in acetate. Yes, it's very, very blood red, that's correct. The chloride is more yellow. You can use the colors to kind of understand what form it's in. But anyway, this would create the old school iron elixir. Now, in some alchemical traditions, they would just grind something up into very small particles. Gold, for example, was made into palatable gold, or they call potable gold, I think it was called, by just mixing very small amounts into alcohol. I don't really agree with that, as it's a little bit janky and not quite so good. There are better ways to make it. Is actually making a chemical crystal form, an organic chemical crystal form, and then turning it into a ethanol form, as I said. That's a much better way than just drinking very small amounts. But of course, there was a lot of trial and error with alcohol, and a lot of research that went into all this kind of stuff. Now, crystals were sometimes dry distilled acetate crystals to form oil. First, of course, you would have to get off the acetone and various liquids formed in the acetate crystals, but eventually it would give a oil, supposedly. Still working on developing that technique. And of course, animal reagents are very similar to herbal, where they also can and are refined in similar ways as herbal. If you boil herbal reagents in water and alcohol, they will generally form a liquid, or vinegar as well. I like to think of all this as a digestive system. In our mouth, we chew and destroy things, which is grinding it up with a grind or a pestle and mortar, or sometimes you have to put various chemicals over something. You heat it with various alkali or vinegars or acids or something, and this would soften the material and make it easier to grind, or easier to change its chemical state to another one. If you look at the making of Ayurvedic Bhasma, B-H-A-S-M-A, I think it's called, spelt, that's a very interesting one. They use old school techniques of various herbal juices and all kind of lower level chemicals to eventually create this edible powdered organic kind of mineral substance. So again, if you just say you had bones are very tough. They don't want to leach their minerals very easily. Uncalcined bones, for reference, you would have to grind them up very, very small. You would potentially mix it in with a bone ash, or a fine bone ash, which would be a calcium carbonate, or a calcium oxide, calcium hydroxide, one of these things, and you could mix in a little bit of water and cook the bone ash for, it could be days, it could be a day, it could be weeks. It really depends. If you read a lot of these old alchemical books, they have various long, almost month-long extraction processes, where sometimes they slowly heat something in various chemicals and do all kinds of things with them. But everything usually has its own different extraction process, and usually you will use the kingdom class of reagents, which is the acids, the alkalis, the extraction oils or volatiles or spirits or alcohols or whatever, to extract it. For example, animal reagents are used for animal extractions. Maybe organs or bones or meat or whatever you're extracting, and plant reagents, alcohol, vinegar, potassium, sodium hydroxide are used for plant extraction. But as I said, I don't like to use chemicals unless I have to, just because it's a little bit difficult to get them out. Sometimes if it's an alkali, you have to dry distill it. If it's an acid, you have to wet distill it away or evaporate it away, and then you have to wash it with water. And it just gets a little bit annoying, so I try to use as little as possible. But of course, there's nothing wrong with researching this and trying it out on your own and such. You don't have to eat everything that you make, and you will find a lot of things that you you don't want to eat, or you can't eat, or they're not quite palatable, and that'll tell you that it's not edible, so to speak. If something tastes terrible and it burns or it causes you weird effects, of course, for I guess legal purposes, I don't recommend eating weird things or whatever. But for alchemical purposes, usually you eat very, very, very tiny amounts, and you want to have a grasp on this. You want to know what you're working with, to know that it's fine. If you take a regular common healing herb and you heat it in water and you drink some of it, you will know that it's going to be fine. So you just have to use that common sense and your alchemical intelligence for this. But anyway, I hope this was interesting and taught you a little bit more about alchemy. And of course, if you want to email me, my email is down below. I have my other social medias, and if you're interested in books, music, services, or anything else, I have my stuff down below. I have my Gumroad, which has most of my stuff, my Fiverr, most of my services. There's also an Amazon and some other things down below. So anyway, hope you enjoy that and have a nice day.